There are 4 watches that seem to have a grip over the industry, and these are the 4 watches that you need in your collection. Welcome back to Time on the Wrist at Chisholm Hunter. My name is Harrison, as always, and today we're going to talk about the brands that are the pinnacle focus in the industry. The brands that all the watch collectors, all the watch enthusiasts seem to obsess over. The brands that have such a big draw that they kind of dominate the space. And this is really apparent actually on YouTube, and we've seen it especially on our channel. For example, we did a factory visit to Glashütte, to Glashütte Original's factory. It was an incredible video, really, really informative. And Glashütte Original are an amazing brand, there's no doubt about it. But their name just doesn't get the same amount of attention, the same amount of draw. It doesn't catch the eye as much as Omega or Rolex. And then actually this became apparent because we did a Glashütte Original video, but we said that they were a Rolex Submariner killer, and it got triple the amount of views that the original video without that did. So these brands seem to captivate us in ways that you just can't imagine. And I think there's a couple of different reasons as to as to why this actually happens with brands, as to why they encapsulate us and we get obsessed with them. I think they play in to 3 different factors. I'm going to break it down into 3 different factors. We've got rarity, and this can be seen in Rolex. Although they do produce 1 million watches a year, we perceive them as rare because you just can't get them readily. Then you have quality. Omega, prime example. COSC and METAS certified, and they're readily available to buy. You cannot beat the quality of an Omega for the price. Or even a Longines would probably play into that as well. And next up, you've got the hype factor. Vacheron had a huge amount of hype around it over the overseas collection. It also had extreme quality and extreme rarity, hence the reason why the prices rocketed on the pre-owned market. The first watch that I think all collectors need and that all collectors love and that the watch community loves in general plays into 2 of these 3 factors. And it of course is the Omega Seamaster, something that I get so much stick because I talk about it all the time. But the problem is that the community talks about it all the time and I just get involved in the conversations. This is the watch that was in James Bond. It is James Bond's watch, so it covers the hype scenario. It has a huge amount of hype around it because when James Bond's movies are released, the watch is dropped, so to speak, and there's hype around it. It also covers quality because it's COSC and METAS certified. It is an icon in the industry because of its ties to James Bond. As well as this, for a diving watch, it is totally functional, shall we say. It goes to 300 meters of water resistance, has a helium escape valve. Some people hate it, some people love it. You can't argue that it's iconic. It has sapphire crystal glass, has obviously COSC and METAS certified movement. Yes, these movements are mass produced, but that is reflected in the price of these watches. And I argue a lot of the time, people say to me, ETA movements aren't good because they aren't in-house, but a lot of the time brands try to create in-house movements and they aren't as good as ETA movements. Now obviously Omega are in-house movements to Swatch, but Swatch own a lot of brands. And that's the first watch that I think is iconic in the industry and that every watch collector needs. I'm not going to talk about it too much because, to be honest guys, on this channel I'm heavily aware that I maybe talk about it too much. So the next watch that is kind of ruffling a lot of feathers in the industry, as well as being pretty iconic and innovating their movements, is next, and it's a Grand Seiko. Specifically with Grand Seiko, we're going to talk about their Spring Drive collection. And I'm not going to specify it down, narrow it down to one watch because the whole Spring Drive collection is pretty awesome, but the Snowflake is definitely, to me, the pinnacle there. And I think that Grand Seiko feed into a couple of the kind of niches that we talked about at the start. One being rarity. There was a massive thing about 2 years ago about the Snowflake and about how you couldn't buy the Snowflake on the primary market. You had to buy it on the secondary market for slightly above the retail value. That's kind of evened out in the moment. It's kind of leveled itself out, and you can buy the Snowflake now, but people still perceive them as quite rare. As well as this, they feed into both the quality and the hype section. The hype section because the Grand Seiko / Seiko's fan group, or or supporters, shall we say. I have never seen anything like it. If you say anything negative about a Grand Seiko or a Seiko watch online, you get destroyed in the comment section. They have such a loyal fan base, and it's growing obviously as Grand Seiko get bigger, and this causes a lot of hype in that area about their brands. That hype is infectious and it infects those around it to buy more Grand Seiko watches. And next up we have the insane quality that comes out of Japan for these Grand Seiko watches. The insane craftsmanship that's put into these beautiful timepieces. When you look at the case and bracelet of a Grand Seiko, more often than not, it has Zaratsu polishing, which is pretty unique to Grand Seiko. And they actually traditionally used to use this on samurai swords. It's a polishing technique, and I can tell you firsthand that it's absolutely incredible. No other brand looks as polished as Grand Seiko does. Next up, you've got the incredible innovation that goes into Grand Seiko's movements. More specifically, their innovation when it comes to spring drive movements. Now, if you're watching this video, I know that you probably know what spring drive is, but for those of you that don't, it's almost like a hybrid car. It uses the best technology from both quartz and automatic to regulate its time more accurately. And if you look at a Grand Seiko, if you look at the second hand of a Grand Seiko, it flows wonderfully. It doesn't look like it's ticking at all because it's ticking so fast. It's unbelievable. Now, there is no denying that these watches are that little bit more expensive, that little bit more pricey because of the quality and the craftsmanship that goes into them. I mean, look at the dials. They are known as the king of dials because their textured dials are stunning. They're extreme quality when it comes to movements and polishing. Everything combined just makes a watch lover's dream. And I think that's why the watch community are just obsessed. Next up is probably my favorite watch in this video. And I kid you not, this watch is incredible. I had this watch, or I say I had because I lost it. I had this watch for a good 3 or 4 years. It was unbelievable. It feeds in to that hype mentality because it has such a big community that love this watch. And it plays into the quality aspect because you can buy it for £10 and it survives for at least 10 to 20 years. It is the Casio F91W. There is no doubt about it that when you think of your youth, when you think of being at school or college or university or wherever you are in the world, you probably wore a Casio on your wrist. If you wore anything on your wrist, it was a Casio. It is a sentimental piece of your childhood that people seem to just want to grow up with. They want to have it in their collection. They want to look at it and look back in the times that they couldn't afford the Rolex or they couldn't afford the Omega. And the hype around Casio is merited by the quality. I had a Casio. I picked up a Casio for £10 before I went to South America. It lasted me 4 years until I lost it. It wasn't the Casio's mistake, it was my mistake. The quality of the Casio did not falter. My brain did. And that is the beauty of Casio. The quality is there. It's cheap, but the quality still is there. And that nostalgia that you feel about a watch, it doesn't come around often. It truly doesn't. And I think that's why it holds such a place in the watch community's heart and why everyone needs a Casio, no matter what Casio is, but probably that one in their collection. The next watch on the list is a watch that there's quite a lot of hostility about. It's kind of a shade of grey for me to talk about because as soon as I talk about it, there's fights that break out in the comments. People start arguing. Some people hate it, some people love it. It's a very controversial brand. But no matter what you think of this brand, you cannot deny the incredible effect, the incredible benefit it's been to the watch industry. Before we start talking about this incredible watch though, before we start talking about the creme de la creme of this fit, actually that's too big a statement. It's not creme de la creme because Grand Seiko probably takes the cake here, but it's a pretty awesome watch. I just want to talk about Chisholm Hunter for a second because this is Chisholm Hunter's channel, and if it wasn't for Chisholm Hunter, we wouldn't be able to speak to you and have this incredible watch community. They are authorized retailers for most of the watches that you see on this channel, as well as amped amount of diamonds, and they have their own brand of diamonds. So if you want something for yourself, or let's say the missus, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, click the link below. And we get there at long last. We get to the Rolex Submariner. The iconic Rolex Submariner that plays into every quality. It plays into rarity. Well, perceived rarity. I mean, they make 1 million watches a year, but because you can't buy them, people have this perception they're extremely, extremely rare. Just because of how in demand they are. So they play into that rareness part. They play in to the quality part because they're beautiful timepieces. There's no doubt about it that they are really, really incredibly made works of art. And finally, we get on to the hype aspect of the Rolex, which us, the watch community, makes in general. I told you the story at the beginning of this video about us putting Rolex in a title and so many more people gravitating towards that title just because it had Rolex in it. The genius behind Rolex's marketing is we're the ones that are creating the hype, not Rolex. All they need to do is produce the product and we're doing the rest. And that is, I hate to say it, but the genius behind Rolex. Everyone, including myself, I might not get there, I probably won't get there, but everyone wants a Rolex because of this genius effect that they have on the community. I mean, I have said the Rolex Submariner here, but realistically, I'm just gonna switch that to any Rolex. I think if you get any Rolex, you are proud of the watch that you own. And it's just the effect, this halo effect that Rolex kind of has around it. I mean, love or hate them, you cannot deny the profound effect that they have had on the watch community and the watch economy, the economics of watches in general. They own 28.8% of the industry as of 2022. That is humongous. To put that into perspective, Swatch's biggest brand, Omega, only owns 7.5. At the end of the day, Rolex have got where they are for a reason. And in my eyes, it's feeding into that hype factor, feeding into that quality factor, and feeding into that perceived, and I say perceived in bold caps there, because they do produce 1 million watches a year, but that perceived rarity factor. And they have a formula that works, and I tip my cap to them. They have made a huge impact on the watch community. And that was 4 watches that I feel you need in your collection. And I apologize, we kind of went on a rant for most of that video, but I think that's kind of a direction that I want to go down with the channel. I think that making it more conversational, having a conversation about, you know, things that are going on in the market, things that are interesting in the market, things that I'm observing from a retail side of things, and showing and sharing these things with you is something that I find quite interesting. So if you like that, please let me know in the comments and we'll continue to do that. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you could subscribe, it would be much appreciated. And I'll see you soon.